Good morning, Matt Moran. How are you, buddy?
I'm good. How are you?
It's great to see your smiling face. We've
Thank you.
chatted on Facebook for a long time.
Yeah, we have.
Finally made this happen.
It's finally here. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Thank you
I
for
screwed
having me.
I screwed up the first time we messed up, but well,
That's okay. It was a time that happens to me all the time with the time difference. It's a regular thing for me, so
yeah.
don't feel bad.
Why don't you move somewhere like civil, like California?
I used to live in California.
Really?
I lived in Santa Barbara for 5 years and loved every single minute of it except the traffic
Right.
and the taxes. But other than that, the weather and the people, I loved living out there. We were right on the beach. It was incredible. Yeah. I
And
miss
you
it a
left
lot.
that?
I left. Well, the relationship that I was in ended. I moved permanently back to Nashville. We had a home in both places. So I took Nashville and he took our Santa Barbara residence. So yeah, that's what happens when you don't
I
want to
think
be in
he
the same
I
city.
think he got the better of the deal
I
here.
well, Nashville's pretty great, but I do miss the ocean. Yeah.
Right. Oh, I
Yeah.
do too.
I won't lie there.
I used to be on the water up north of Seattle. I had a mid-century saltwaterfront triplex,
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah.
gray on gray on gray. But man, those 2 months were so good.
I mean, I think we're part of when I lived on the water, it was like, oh, my body loves this. Like just being that close to the water and the mountains in Santa Barbara, you're like right in between them. So it's like my body felt at peace all the time. It was just great. And then I would come back to Nashville and it'd be like, this is great, but it's not, it's not California.
Are you
So
happy there?
in Nashville, very, very. I moved here in 1998 after I graduated college. And other than, having a place in Santa Barbara, I also lived in my partner and I at the time, I was with a partner for 8 years, and we had a place in Milwaukee, which is where he was from, here in Nashville. And then we had our California place. So we kind of
Whoa.
floated. We floated. And then we had some cabins in northern Wisconsin that we floated to too. So we floated around between 4 different places. It was an experience. It was exhausting, never knowing where your pants were, like your
Right.
favorite pair of jeans, but it was fun while it lasted. I'm thankful for it. Yeah, he's a very well-known architect.
Oh, is he?
So yeah, and we together kind of built his business to a really, really solid place. So yeah, we had a lot of fun. We got to do a lot of fun things. We got to go to Oscar parties and Grammy parties in LA. And it was just, hobnob with some really, fun people that I never would in my life have thought I would ever get a chance to meet. And that was fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right, Mr. Matt. So we'll talk about some of your professional stuff, but I want to hear about, I want the dirt on you.
Okay.
So you didn't grow up in Nashville then, right?
No, I was born in Minneapolis and grew up really primarily in Bloomington, Minnesota, which is where the Mall of America is.
Minnesota.
Minnesota. Everybody repeats it back to me like that when I tell them I'm from Minnesota. Though I've pretty much lost most of my Minnesota accent. It left years ago. But yeah, I was
You
raised.
mean you mean I'm a cliche saying the same thing
I
everybody
mean,
says?
I don't want to say it out loud, but that's what everybody says.
Minnesota. Is that better?
Whenever I say I'm from Minnesota, people go, "Oh, Minnesota," and I'm like, "Yes, I've heard that 1,000 times." Yeah,
I hate being a cliche.
it's all right.
Anyway.
You're allowed.
Anyway,
It's okay.
so you moved from Minnesota to where?
To Nashville, but that wasn't until I was
Okay.
22 years old.
Okay.
So I grew up in Minnesota. It was really cold, and I'm not built for the cold. So I left when I was 18 to go to college, and then left the Midwest altogether and went to Nashville. But yeah, I was born to a single mom. By the time I was born, my dad had already split. Let's just say he was not the best of humans. So he took off 5 months in my mom's pregnancy. And while she was pregnant with me, she befriended someone who was a very strong Christian in a very fundamentalist Christian evangelical church. And so my mom got saved, for anybody that knows what that means. And I was raised in the church. I went to private Christian school up until 7th grade. And that was really my, identity in a lot of ways was being raised in that church. So I was a musical kid. So I did a lot of singing. As a kid, I started singing. I started doing a lot of work for radio and TV when I was about 8 years old, primarily singing, but also doing some hosting of children's programs, and did that up until about my teen years, and then sort of just went through high school and did the normal high school experience. And yeah, but I'm kind of a rare breed. At least I found this to be true, in that I didn't have any clue that I was gay as a kid. I didn't even know that I was different. I can look back now and see all of the signs. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the Dukes of Hazzard when it was on Friday nights, and I remember being, enamored with Bo Duke. In fact, I have a funny story, quick story. I ran into him at a musical event. It was a place here in Nashville about 3 years ago, and he walked by a table I was sitting at, and I literally said, "What is his name?" I'm forgetting his name at the moment. Anybody who's watching this is probably screaming his name out, but I forget. Anyway, I said his name out loud, and he said yes, and I stood up and I said, I just got to tell you, I should have known I was gay at 6 years old because I was enamored with you. And he was so sweet. He gave me this huge smile, which about floored me. And he said, "Can I give you a hug?" And I was
Oh,
like,
wow. Oh,
"Yes,
yeah.
yes, you can." I just said, "Make it a really long one." So he gave me a nice, like 15-second hug, which is great. So I haven't
Wow.
showered since.
Wow. That's
Anyway,
great.
that was fun. But yeah, I didn't have any clue that I was gay until I was literally 22 years old. And, I look back now and I realize that I think, and I only have sort of a suspicion of this, but I think it was because I grew up in such a Christian bubble. The only exposure I had to gay people was via the 5 o'clock news. And it was seeing, video of gay men in Speedos in a parade walking down the street in San Francisco. And I didn't relate to that at all. That
Right.
wasn't part of my makeup. I wasn't, I was just one of those kids who just didn't relate to that. And so I never stopped to think, oh, I must be gay. What I do remember thinking is, I want to be like these guys. I want to be like Bo Duke. I want to be like, so and so. And so I think I just wanted to emulate them. And I didn't have a father. So that sort of resonated with me as accurate,
Right.
because I was like, I don't have a dad to look up to. So I look up to these other figures. I didn't realize that, I actually was romantically attracted to these people. So, and I had girlfriends up through, in fact, I've never said this publicly, but I was a big fan of movies from the time I was little. And I think seeing people make out in movies, I was like the makeout king of my kindergarten and first year class. I mean, with girls, I love to make out. Their fathers, if they ever hear this, I won't say names because they'll probably want to murder me. But yeah, I was every father's nightmare for his little girl back then. I mean, just making out, that was all it was. And it was probably a joke to looking back on it now. But anyway, so that I never sort of questioned things. And then when I was finishing out college, I realized that I had attraction to men, and it sent me reeling. I immediately started having intense panic attacks in class. I would shake while trying to sleep at night. And my second semester of my senior year was a nightmare. I barely slept. It's amazing I graduated college. So I made it through that. But in the process, one night, got up in the middle of the night. I remember it was 2:30 a.m. on the clock. There was a snowstorm outside, but it was one of those snowstorms where the snow was just kind of gently falling, but it was a ton of snow. And I got up and I walked about 1.5 miles to a bridge that I knew that other people had jumped off and ended their lives before, because the water underneath was known for having a strong toe to it. I climbed over the edge and hung from it, fully prepared to let go. But I remember looking up at the sky, and it was full of different colors, even though it was nighttime. And I remember thinking, if I do this, my mom, who loved me more than anything on the planet, would never know what happened to me. And I thought, oh, I can't do it this way, because that will just torture her, and I can't do that to her. So I climbed back up over the railing and thought, I have to think of something else.
Were you literally hanging like this?
Oh, yeah.
You're kidding.
Middle of the night. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, closest I've ever come to that. So,
Wow.
But I really thought, like so many gay men who are raised in Christian homes do, that I had to choose between being gay and being acceptable to God. And I didn't know how to make that choice. I felt like it was a lose-lose. And so I thought, well, there's no point in going on anymore, because that's not a choice I can make. Both are, equally valid. Climbed back up over the railing, made it through the rest of my senior year. And then when I went back home that summer before I moved to Nashville, I told my pastor at church. He met me for coffee at McDonald's. The first time I'd ever admitted this out loud. And I basically said to him, I have, we called it same-sex attraction back then, right?
Oh, yeah. I've been through the whole thing.
Right. So you get it. So I told him that, and he said, oh, well, that's not shocking to me. Like, there's places you can go for that. And he made it sound like it was just sort of like, there's a place you can go and get fixed.
Yep. Done.
And I was like, great, sign me up. Like, the sooner the better. So he put me in touch with a counseling center, which then referred me to one in Nashville when I moved here to Nashville. And I started working with a therapist in a group counseling scenario, which would now be considered ex-gay therapy. And we were together for about 7 months. And I just realized I'm doing a lot of talking. Is this okay that I'm
Oh,
taking us down this
absolutely.
road?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
All right. So I spent 7 months with those guys, built some great friendships, but I remember very vividly walking out of the front door of that office building on the final day. And I don't know why this is such a vivid memory for me, but I remember the sun hit my eyes. And the thought that went through my head was, I'm still gay. Like I'm still the same. What the hell am I going to do? And at the time, my faith was still very important to me. So I kind of just threw up my hands and dove into, for lack of a better word, debauchery. Like I just started sleeping around, and I kind of gave up my faith for a while and just let go.
You were how old at this
It
point?
was
Still
20. I was 23.
23.
23.
Okay,
Yeah.
so now that we pause for a second,
Sure.
so was there something specifically that triggered you that made you at 22 that said I'm gay? What caused that?
Yes, I've noticed that I was having an attraction to a really good friend of mine. And there was one experience where his girlfriend, long story, but his girlfriend basically got in between us at some point, and I felt very threatened by her. And I remember just feeling filled with rage in that moment. It was the first time that I ever just experienced like extreme jealousy in that
Wow.
way. I was cooking dinner on the stove. I was cooking spaghetti. I remember this like it was yesterday, and I was stirring the spaghetti with a fork. And I
Right.
remember looking up at the clock and literally whispering out loud, "Oh my God, I'm gay."
Really?
And yeah, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. Ton
You
of
know,
bricks.
spaghetti does that.
It does. It does. That hit me like a ton of bricks too. More so today than it did back then. But yeah, so that was the beginning of me sliding down into really just panic attacks and full on misery. It was hell. I really, really genuinely mean it when I say that I'm surprised I made it through that year of school,
Wow.
because I was such a disaster mentally. So anyway, yeah, fast forward to back to Nashville, went through my first round of therapy, conversion therapy, and came out and was like, well, screw it. This didn't work. So I might as well just, go nuts. So my first real experience sexually was at a gym in the steam room. I will actually backtrack.
I am shocked.
I know that I'm probably the only gay guy who's ever experienced that
Right.
before, but
Right.
yeah, it actually did happen. I'll
Wow.
backtrack really quickly. It's interesting because in therapy, I've sort of uncovered this. In high school, when I was a sophomore, I started working out at the gym, and the locker room was in the basement of the gym, and then there was a sauna located in the back corner. And I remember looking back on it now, my mom, God love her, she was incredible, amazing mom. I thank God for her almost every day when I think about it. But she didn't have a husband, and I very much felt like I had to be her sort of surrogate spouse. And that felt like a lot of pressure. And I remember escaping to the gym a lot and down into that sauna because it felt like a safe place that was as far away as I could get from that pressure from her. And never had an experience in there, but I remember very much liking that there were naked guys coming in and out, and didn't put two and two together for whatever reason. I think I just thought I wanted to be like them, But that was kind of how that started. And then when I moved to Nashville and went through conversion therapy and it didn't work, I think my quick thought was, I'll just go back to the locker room because that felt like a safe place for me. And as a coach today, I've learned that we develop coping mechanisms as kids to survive, right? It's one of the things my therapist said to me years ago was like, I'm so glad you had that sauna to go to because it provided you some sort of relief.
Right.
But moving into my 20s, then that scenario became my safe place. And I would literally go to the YMCA, hang out in the steam room for 3 hours at a time, in and out, in and out, in and out, walk out so dehydrated I could barely walk. But I was just looking for some sort of connection, some affirmation that I was enough, that I was attractive, that I was wanted.
Right.
And so, a lot of stuff went down there, and it lasted for, probably about 2 years. I went through that. But within that 2 years, I realized like, I feel this is fun, but it feels empty. Like I don't get any real sort of fulfillment from this.
Right.
And at that time in my life, I didn't really see the option of being in a partnership with someone that was life-giving and fulfilling. And
Right.
monogamous, which is what I've always kind of been about. And so I thought, well, this must be what it's like to be gay, just kind of hopping in and out of people's beds. And this doesn't feel good. So I enrolled in my second round of gay conversion therapy. And while the first one,
At a different
yeah,
location?
at my
Okay.
church, they had a
Okay.
program that was put on by Exodus International, which you're probably familiar with.
It's funny because I had one of the leaders, the guy's really involved in that 2 weeks ago on my
Did
podcast.
you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
John Smith. Yeah. Eh,
That name sounds familiar. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
And that was really a turning point for me in a really tough way, because that group was very much focused on you're broken, you're broken, you're broken. You need to be healed. And, they literally had a night where they tried to cast demons out of us. It was really, really heavy. And I remember for the 4 months that program went on, I cried every single day at home, and not just cried, but sobbed. I look back on it and I had to have been immensely dehydrated during that time, especially after 2 years of spending so much time in the steam room at the gym. But yeah, I sobbed every day, and I eventually sunk into a really deep clinical depression, to the point where my best friend at the time said to me, you need to go on medication because you're not okay. My body shut down. I stopped being able to digest food. Just wouldn't, everything would go right through me. I would sleep like 16 hours a night. I just couldn't get enough sleep, really depressed. And so I eventually had to move home back to Minnesota to be with my mom, because I just couldn't even support myself. And it was then that I confessed to her over dinner one night that I was same-sex attracted. And that did not go so well. She had probably could be compared to a pretty close to a nervous breakdown over it. It hit a lot of buttons for her and was very triggering and activating for her on a lot of levels. She
Right,
felt like God had failed her as a father to the fatherless, which she always said. And
right.
felt like her faith just went into the toilet, and felt like I'd lied to her for all these years. So it really put a wedge between us in a way that I'd never experienced before, because she was really one of my
Wow.
very best friends. So that was really hard. When I finally got out of gay conversion therapy, I was so depressed and so messed up physically that I remember sitting at my kitchen table one day. God, these memories are so vivid for me. Sat at my kitchen table and I said to God out loud, I was alone at home, and I said, this isn't working. Like, my body's a disaster. My brain is completely jacked up. I can't imagine this is how you want my life to be. I remember saying to him, to God, I have so much to give the world, and focusing all my attention on trying not to be gay is sucking all of the life out of me, literally.
Right.
And I said, you know what? I'm just going to, starting today, choose to believe that you made me gay, that you're okay with it, and start living my life as if that's true. And I did,
Hmm.
and never looked back. Now, over the course of the next several months and even years, I started reading books by theologians who had a very different take on scripture than the one I had been raised with. And I started to realize through, authors like Richard Rohr and Peter Enns that there was a whole other progressive idea of scripture and how it's meant to be read that is in direct contradiction to how I was raised, that the Bible is the inerrant word of God. And so that, along with my own personal struggle, helped me sort of move into a new kind of understanding of God and faith. And that's continued to evolve over the years, for sure. But it really set me free. My body started to heal again. I had a couple relationships that were about, probably 6 months long, and they were really good relationships. Didn't work out. We stayed friends. I'm still in contact with them to this day, but it showed me that, like, a healthy relationship within the confines of a gay lifestyle, quote unquote, is possible. It's
Right.
possible.
Right.
So from that point on, things started to move in a really healthy direction. And since then, I've really started sharing my own journey and experiences of healing and, for lack of a better word, restoration, with other people who are still going through the same thing, because there are still so many, especially in middle America, who are still experiencing rejection from parents, rejection from families and friends, rejection from their church, and they're left in this place where they don't know what to do. And so, my hope is that just my experience, along with hopefully them hearing other people's experience, can shed some light on their own story and help
Right.
them move to a healthier place. But I will say, fast forward to a few years ago, one of the things I've always noticed in sort of quote unquote gay culture is that, the bars can be a fun way to let off steam. The apps can be fun and interesting. I did a TED talk on sort of ridding my life of shame, and that's been monumental for me. But because of that, I have no sense of shame around those things, even being promiscuous. It's like, it's a choice. And everybody, I think, needs to go through that at some point to figure out what they really are about. I think it's
Right.
really important to kind of rite of passage. But I realized that there were a lot of gay men, including myself, who wanted more than just the bar scene and the apps. They felt lonely in a gay bar. They would come out feeling empty and more lonely than they were when they walked in. The apps is just a brutal place. I mean, there's so much ghosting and rejection and, judging people based on appearance.
Right.
And, gay people are human beings like straight folks. So we want more connection than that. And I realized there's a lot of guys talking to me that are telling me they want more authenticity. They want more connection. They want real conversations with gay men, not just conversations about dicks and,
Right.
partying. And so I don't attend church, but I'm really good friends with a minister and his wife who run a very progressive gay affirming church. In fact, there are a lot of atheists that actually go there. It's more like a community than it is a church.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But he encouraged me to start a book club for gay men. And I thought, well, that would be kind of a cool idea. So I had read years ago, back in my early 20s, I had read The Velvet Rage. And have you read The Velvet Rage? I'm guessing you have.
I did a book study on it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, for anybody that's listening and hasn't read The Velvet Rage, it's a little dated now, and even the author has said that, but it still in many ways rings true. I decided to do a book club, and I put a post up on Facebook about it. It said, for any gay man that'd be interested in doing this virtually. I figured maybe, I'd be lucky if 8 or 10 guys signed up.
Right.
Within 5 hours, 86 men signed up for this book club virtually from all over the country. So every week we would jump on to Zoom and talk about different chapters of this book. And it was so life-giving for all of us, myself included.
Right.
And at the end of it, we were finishing out our last session, and one of the guys, on the camera raised his hand and he said, can I just say, I don't want this to end. Like, this has been really awesome, and I need this kind of connection in my life. And another guy raised his hand and he said, I'm in agreement. And, everybody else started chiming in and said, can we just continue this in some form or fashion? So we ended up turning the book club into a Facebook group called The Conversation. And it was just for gay men. And we would meet once a month for about a year and a half to discuss various topics. I would bring in guest speakers. And it was awesome. We had over 100 guys in the group. And, we'd jump on Zoom and have these amazing conversations about stuff that just never got talked about in bars and on apps. And even these guys would say, I don't talk to my gay friends about this stuff. It's so nice to have a place where there are like-minded gay men who want to talk about things like vulnerability and the hard parts of dating and sex and shame and et cetera, et cetera. So that went on for about a year and a half. That was during COVID, actually, which I'm sure helped grow it. But when COVID ended, I kind of felt like I had to get back into my work, which I'd taken a little bit of a pause from. So the group, I said, we got to kind of disband this, guys, because I can't keep it going. So we disbanded, but I always had in my head, like, if I were to ever start something up again, it would be something like that. And so, 5 years later, this had been about a year and a half ago, I started doing some research on how to start a community platform. I found this platform called Mighty Networks, which hosts, it's almost like a Facebook, but your own private Facebook for whatever group of people you invite to it. And I decided to create a group called the Gay Men's Collective. And it really is just for gay men who are seeking out meaningful connection and an opportunity to grow alongside other gay men. That's our two pillars, is meaningful connection and personal growth. And, guys started signing up. It's a subscription-based thing. I get some pushback for that. It's $27 a month, but we meet 8 to 10 times a month on Zoom. There's a platform that guys share on every day and share their lives with each other. And it's become, I can't even put into words what a beautiful community this has become. The reason I charge for it is because what I was finding with the conversation, the Facebook group, is that guys would join just to join, and they would come in and they'd use it for trying to hook up. And if you don't have some sort of guardrails on the front end, people join and then never show up, or they use it for reasons that it's not designed for. So I was like, we need to have some guardrails here that allow guys who just really want to be here for the reason this group exists. And that's what it's done. It's created an opportunity for guys who want to talk in a respectful way about sex, want to engage on all sorts of topics that we all face in really vulnerable, meaningful ways. And this community, I mean, I had a guy the other night burst into tears. He was literally, I mean, tears pouring down his face. And he just said, I never, ever had gay friends in my life, ever. I've never bonded with the gay community. And he said, I now have all of you guys that I text with and talk with every day. And he just said, I can't believe this is my life now. I just can't believe it. The challenge that we
is that
have,
around the same size as your other group, the 100 guys?
we got about 70 guys right now. It ebbs and flows. I have found that there's a, how do I say this? It's daunting, I think, for a lot of gay men to come into an environment where vulnerability is exercised and celebrated.
Right.
Because vulnerability, by its very definition, means opening yourself up to potentially being hurt, right? And a lot of us have been wounded so many times, not only by our families and friends, but by other gay men, that to sign up for a group and say, I'm going to try and be vulnerable and honest sounds terrifying. So I think it can take guys a little while to drum up the nerve to even sign up for it, much less put their credit card in and then show up to a group meeting. There's a lot of hurdles they kind of have to get past. But once they do and they realize what this group is like, they're usually sold, if that's something that they want in their life. Not everybody's ready for it. Not everybody wants it. And it's okay that it's not for everybody, but for the guys that really want that sort of thing in their life, it's been a beautiful, beautiful thing. I'm continually blown away by what we've built together and by how it's affecting the guys who are in it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. How was that?
I told you I signed up yesterday to try it out.
I'm so glad. And I hope that anybody who's watching this, if that sounds intriguing to them, they'll give us a shot.
We'll put all the links in the episode notes. But
beautiful. Thank you.
So I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I watched your TED Talks.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I've only done one.
Oh, I watched the one on shame.
Shame. Yeah.
How many are there?
There's just one. I've only done one TED Talk.
Oh, okay. All right.
TEDx.
I thought you got me excited. I thought there'd be more. Okay.
No.
All right.
Just
so
one.
anyway, I watched that. But something I was intrigued by it. You talked about your religious background and then the gay life, and you talked about sex, and you said you liked hooking up with somebody and having connection.
Yeah.
How does that work when you're just hooking up? Because see, I've evolved to the point in my life where if I don't have connection, I'm just not interested. Period.
Oh yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Which means I'm not very connected.
Yeah.
Because I'm in Palm Springs, and I'd say at least half the guys here are partnered or married or whatever.
Right.
And they're not monogamous. Let's just put it that way.
Right. Yeah, they're open. Yeah. Yeah. I spent time in Palm Springs.
Yeah. And you talk about the apps. I think it was on Scruff, but probably one of my favorite things I've ever seen on there. The guy put monogamously coupled, play together or separately.
Huh. I'm not sure if he knows what monogamous means.
Well, and I thought, if I could see it if he said only play together, that still wouldn't be monogamous, but I'd get what he was saying.
Right.
But together or separately, like, huh?
Right. Yeah.
But anyway, go back to your connection thing. Because I guess I know what you mean, but talk a little about it.
Well, I think, first of all, I'm a big word guy. So I think we have to define what we mean by connection, right? Because I think that word probably carries a lot of meanings for a lot of people in different ways. For me, connection is probably a combination of chemistry, but beyond that, it's also feeling like there's a safety with someone, which is really important to me, feeling like I'm safe with that person, like emotionally. Right. So, in the past, when I've hooked up with someone who, if we're messing around and they start, even jokingly insulting me to a certain degree, that to me feels a little bit like, I'm not sure that I want to be in this scenario, or just really antagonistic. I don't really click too well with gay men who are overly bitchy and catty. I can appreciate it in a bar setting, but in a romantic or sexual setting, it does not work for me. That doesn't feel safe to me. So someone who is really kind feels connective to me. Someone who's thoughtful, inquisitive is really connective to me. Someone who cares about the experience that I'm having, as opposed to just there treating me like a body to get off with. That's important to me. So that is how I define connection. And, if I'm really honest, have I had hookups that are completely just there for both using each other to get off? 100%. And I don't necessarily think there's anything quote unquote wrong with that. It's not where I'm at today,
Right.
just because it doesn't really resonate with who I am at this stage of my life. But, it definitely did at one point. I much prefer a date today than I did, probably 10 years ago. DATE. Yeah. I'm not even sure that word's in the dictionary anymore. But yeah, I prefer, like, I have a date tonight. I think it's a date. I'm not sure. It could be a friendship thing. I'm not sure. But we're still going to dinner, right? And I'm looking forward to that, like getting to know somebody. And I have found that when there's a connection established, the physical part, I mean, is so much better, at least for me. Now, are there moments where a hookup that has some kink involved to it, where it's like you don't know each other and that's the hot piece of it? Yeah, there's an element of hotness to that too. So, I mean, whatever anybody's into, as long as it's consensual and age appropriate, I'm all for. For me, where I'm at today, I definitely prefer some element of connection and respect, and something there that makes me feel like that I'm a human and seen as a human being, as opposed to just a body. So,
when we were chatting a little before we started, I think I told you I was doing energetic work. And I also told you I have an ex-wife, 3 ex-partners, and an ex-COVID boyfriend. I joked around with my friends and I said, I think my picker is broken. My picker, not my pecker.
No, your picker, yeah.
But so now where I'm at is, if I don't have an energetic connection, it's just not going to happen.
I get that.
And looking back at my life, because I came out way midlife and with a Christian background, the same thing. It was December of 99, middle of it, after a trip to Europe, ended up being by myself. I came out to myself. Similar to you, I looked at my whole life and it's like, well, what I said was, duh. Starting with kind of funny, 6 years old, right? My cousin Harry came to live with us. And being the entrepreneur that I always was, even at a young age, I paid Harry in crackers to show me his dick. But all of those little things through my life, it was like I was oblivious. And again, I was in the church bubble. I didn't even know what gay guys did. I mean, honest to God, I didn't. It was like, plus the whole totally repressed everything from my Christian background. It's like, it's all bad. Don't go there. Don't look there.
I remember it well.
My friends do not believe this, but it's the honest to God truth. I didn't jerk off until after I was married to the woman. That's how fearful I was of everything. That's how. Yeah.
That's fascinating.
And my parents never said the word penis. It was a go-go. Is that a riot or what?
Your penis was a go-go?
Yeah, it was a go-go. Yeah.
God, I wonder where they got that name.
I don't know.
Maybe your mom looked at your dad and said, "You want to go-go?" And that was where it came from. I don't know.
Well, my mother was an underwear model before she met my father.
Wow.
And after they were married, she got saved and blah, blah, blah. And she became a radio preacher.
Wow.
So it's like, so. But anyway, so look, for me, looking back, it's like I had one friend that I had sex with. And looking back, we had an energetic connection that was like out of this world. And it was one time, and I still remember that. It was like probably the best ever in my life. But it was the energy of it.
It's great when that happens.
Yeah.
And it doesn't happen as much as, we would like, I think. But when it happens, it's pretty special. Yeah. I've had a few of those experiences as well. Yeah.
So you're not on the apps.
I've floated in and out of them. To be totally transparent, hooking up is not on my radar as much these days, but I have actually met several great people on Grindr and Scruff who to this day are people that I call to hang out with. So I have floated in and off of Grindr and Scruff, kind of to leave myself open for that possibility,
Right.
And, I'm not going to lie and say that if an opportunity for what seemed like a potentially great hookup came along, I would say no. I wouldn't.
Well, I'm sure you'll get some offers on here. So
yeah, we'll see. I'm sort of out of the window now of gays that are like, the wanted gays age-wise. So I've passed that. So now it's mostly.
Wait, stop,
bro. I'm almost.
You're
I'm 49.
You're a hot young daddy. Come on.
Lord, I've been called daddy a few times, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, I'm approaching 50, so I'm not in that, under 35 hot, sexy window anymore. But yeah, I just try to stay open to whatever might come my way that fits with what resonates with who I am today.
Right.
And not close down to blacks and whites, meaning like to rigid boundaries around I'll do this and I won't do this. It's sort of, I have a guidepost that feels kind of internal. And if something resonates with me, great. If it doesn't, I sort of try to take note of that and go, this doesn't quite resonate with where I'm at energetically. So I think I'm going to say no to that. And I try to listen to that a lot more today than I probably did even 5-10 years ago, because I found that inner guidance system really does serve me.
So you've been single how long now?
I've been single 6 years. I was in a relationship from 2011 to 2019 that I thought was going to last throughout the rest of my life, really. And it did not. He, at the end of the relationship, decided he wanted to be in an open relationship. And for me personally, that just wasn't something I was willing to do. And so we parted ways, and it was devastating for me. Right. But I've come to learn how to appreciate being single in a way that I don't think I ever did before in my life. I mean, granted, there are so many aspects to being single that are really wonderful. I mean, down to like, nobody tells me when to get up in the morning. Nobody tells me when I have to go to bed at night. I get to hold the remote and pick all my own television shows. I get to cook whatever meals I want. Like, we overlook those things when we're in a relationship, but there are a lot of great things to being in a relationship too. So if it comes along and it knocks me over and I'm like, wow, this is too good to say no to, then I would definitely explore that. But I am at a point in my life where unless it is so right and just lines up with me in a really great way, I'd rather struggle with loneliness single than struggle with being lonely in a relationship any day of the week. And I definitely struggle with loneliness at times. I'm a big touch person. Physical affection is my number one love language. So that piece feels like it's glaringly missing from my life. But, I have a great dog who loves to cuddle. She doesn't quite measure up to skin, but, she's great on a rainy day.
I just spilled my glass of water all over my sofa.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you have to clean it up?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's water.
Okay.
It's water. So let's talk about your coaching. How'd you get into that?
Yeah. Well, like I said, I started working in the entertainment business when I was 8 and did that really up until about 13 or 14. And then when I went to college, I went to become a filmmaker. I thought I was going to make films. Graduated, moved to Nashville, and became a songwriter. So entertainment in various forms has always been a part of my life, and being on stage has always been something that's been very, very comfortable for me. My dad was a recording artist and performed for a living. So I think it was just in my blood, even though I wasn't raised with him. And
so stop. Did you ever meet him?
I did. Oh, that's a story. Yeah. I don't know if you want to hear that story.
Oh, yeah, we do.
It's a good one.
Let's come back to that.
Okay. So yeah, being on stage has always been one of the safest places for me ever. I just feel immensely comfortable in a spotlight. And I've done theater and acting and all sorts of on-camera work, as well as hosting television programs and on stage. So that's always felt really comfortable for me. So when I realized that songwriting was not something I wanted to keep pursuing full time, I decided that I would pursue teaching other people how to be on stage, because I recognized there were a lot of people who struggled with public speaking and performing. And so via a number of avenues, I became a coach for a company that I contracted with, where I would go out to companies and I would teach people how to construct and deliver all sorts of speeches and presentations, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And it was immediately like square peg, square hole. It just fit me like a glove. I realized that I have a deep desire to teach. I love teaching. I love engaging with participants and clients in that way.
Right.
So about 4 years after I started working for that company, I broke off and started my own coaching company called Moran Presentations. And to this day, I coach executives and their teams, as well as performing artists, recording artists, etc., on how to construct presentations and how to speak to media, how to give keynotes, how to give TED Talks, how to communicate more effectively with their teams if they're leaders. I work a lot with teams on how to make collaboration more effective and impactful. Anything that has to do with how to communicate more effectively to get to a specific result. That's my shtick. So I've been doing that on my own now for the past 15 years, I guess, 14 years. And I love it. But since Gay Men's Collective has come along, I've realized that I've really enjoyed the opportunity to move into talking not just about communication, but also just about how we as humans can thrive better. And so I do, because I've done so much work on myself via therapy, through meditation, through all sorts of means. I now do a
Right.
lot of videos. You've probably seen them on just how to thrive more effectively, how to work through conflict, how to meditate, how to eat right, ways that we can just start looking at ourselves with with a lens that is not viewed through shame and make our lives better, make them more fruitful and more fulfilling. So I'm sort of moving that direction. My dream of dreams is to host a television program that allows me to bring on guests, celebrity guests, gurus of all type, and engage with an audience, a live audience, in discussion on things like this, because that's where I just find that I
Wow.
thrive the
Now,
most.
on Facebook, let's see, you were doing an interview or something with Amy Grant, right?
Yeah.
So, what was the context of that? I didn't quite get the whole thing.
Well,
You
so
were
Amy
interviewing her for what?
Yeah. So I'll just give you the backstory to that. So Amy Grant was a lifeline for me growing up. Growing up in Christian music, if somebody grew up in Christian world, they know that name well.
Right.
And then she sort of exploded into the pop world in the early 90s. And I followed her career from the time I was about 6 years old. I sang all of her songs at Christmas concerts and, spring concerts at school. I was kind of known for like bringing Amy Grant to the stage in my grade school years. And
Now, wait, how old is she now?
well, now she's 64. I mean, she's
Wow,
a very young
I still think of her
64.
as like 30.
No, yeah. She acts like a 30-year-old, but she's 64 with grandchildren.
Right. Right.
So fast forward, when I moved to Nashville, I got involved in the Christian music scene and had many friends who were close to her, and our worlds kind of collided a few times. It wasn't until about 10 years ago that we actually got to spend some quality time together and just really clicked. And, they say never meet your heroes, but I'll tell you, she has in every way surpassed anything I could have imagined about the kind of person she is, just from a character perspective. So
Right.
her family kind of adopted mine. She and Vince Gill is her husband. They kind of adopted me as their, I don't know, surrogate. So I spend all of my holidays with their family.
Really?
Yeah, and their Vince's daughter is one of my very best friends. We started a video production business together, and then I'm close to all of her kids, and their kids now call me Gunkle Matt. So it's become my Nashville family, which has been really amazing just for my heart, because I'm not close to my family who are in Minnesota. Geographically, I'm not close to them, so it's great to have a family like that here. But yeah, so Amy's manager asked me several weeks ago, they were hosting a fan event at Amy's farm for fans to fly in from all over the country, and Amy was going to have them come out to her farm, and they would do like a Q&A and bring in one of her producers, Keith Thomas, who's produced everyone under the sun, along with Amy. And she asked if I would interview them in front of the fans. And so I did an interview with them, which was really amazing. I texted Jennifer, who's Amy's manager, this morning, and I said it was really wild for me, because having now been friends with Amy for the last 10 years, I don't even really see her as Amy Grant anymore. I just see her as my friend Amy.
Right.
And to be in that setting with her, around all of her fans as a fan, and be asking her questions about her career, which she and I don't talk about very often, it was, I almost felt like I was talking to a stranger, right? It was like, oh my gosh, I'm talking to Amy Grant, and yet I spend all my holidays at her house. It was very weird, but really wonderful at the same time. It was like the little boy in me was jumping up and down. So really fun. Yeah. Yeah. And if you want to watch that, people can go. Somebody posted the whole video of it on the Friends of Amy Facebook page. So Friends of Amy Grant. Yeah. Somebody wants to watch it. Yeah.
So your dad, what's the story?
Oh gosh, my dad. Yeah. Okay. So my mom had pictures of him taken for the 2.5 years they were together. They were together 2 years. They got engaged 2 years into their relationship. She got pregnant. And then 5 months into the pregnancy, he said, I can't be faithful to you. And he left. So they were together 2.5 years. I had one interaction with him when I was young, maybe two, but it was so young, I didn't remember it very well. I was 25, 26. I think I was 26. And I said to my mom, I want to meet my dad. Like, I want to meet him as an adult and just know what he's like. I've never had a connection with him. So she was able to track him down. He was still in Minneapolis and still performing. And we agreed to meet for lunch. Now, we had known that he had met and married another woman after he left my mom, and she had a baby from another man. So he kind of raised that child as his own son, right? So it was really strange because we decided to meet for lunch and his wife showed up at the lunch, which I thought was really odd. Like I thought it would just be him and me. So we're having lunch and it was really pretty great, a little awkward, just as you might expect. But at some point he drops into the conversation that I have a half sister. I had no clue this was a thing. I didn't realize I had any half siblings. And he said, yeah, she lives in Colorado. And I said, well, I would love to connect with her. And he said, well, she wants nothing to do with you because she wants nothing to do with me. So that's not possible. And I was really disappointed, but I was like, well, I guess, he probably abandoned her too. So I can guess
Now,
why.
was she the offspring that you mentioned a little while ago?
No. Good
No,
question.
because
She
that
was,
wouldn't have been a half sister of yours.
no, she
So
was,
how did she be? What's the deal?
he had hooked up with a woman prior to my mother and gotten her pregnant and also left. I found this out later.
So this was kind of a thing for him.
Yeah. Well, it gets better. It gets better.
Oh, okay.
So the lunch continues, and I happen to drop into the conversation the fact that he and my mom were engaged when they were together. And his eyes just like hit the table, like his whole head just dropped. Like I had dropped a bomb on the table. And I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that in front of his wife. And she reaches across the table and she puts her hand on my hand and she says, honey, your parents were never engaged. And I was like, yeah, they were for 5 months. I've known this ever since I was a little kid. And she said to me verbatim, that's just something your mother told you so that you wouldn't feel bad about the fact that you were the product of a one-night stand. Well, I was deer in headlights and didn't want to create a scene, but I knew for a fact that wasn't true because my family knew my father well when he was around all the time. He would come to parties and he would bring his guitar and play, and my head started spinning and I didn't really ask any questions. So we left that day, had each other's phone numbers, said we would stay in touch. And I got home that day. My family was all waiting eagerly. They were having a 70th birthday party for my grandma, and they were waiting so excitedly to find out how it went. My mom ran up to the front door and she said, how did it go? And I said, well, can I talk to you for a second? She said, okay. So I pulled into the room and I told her what the woman had said. And she started sobbing. And when she did, I thought, oh God, maybe the woman was right. My mom had lied to me all these years. Well, my grandma walked in the room and I told her, and she said, that rat bastard. She said, he lied to you. He was around all the time. And so my mom cried for a week. She was so devastated that my father, who had just left her and me by the side of the road, essentially, waited 26 years to throw her under the bus to me, like she was a one-night stand, which she very much was not. So I called him about a week later. I remember I was sitting on my bed. This was, back before we had cell phones.
Wow.
I literally called him on an old dial-up, punch the buttons phone. And I said, look, I've pretty much figured out that you probably told your wife that I was the product of a one-night stand a long time ago in order to keep from having to tell her that you were with someone for 2.5 years, got her pregnant, and then ditched.
Left.
And he was dead silent. So I knew I was right. And I said, my mom deserves a whole lot more respect than that for raising me by herself with no support from you. So I said, you need to tell your wife the truth. And there was, probably 10 seconds of silence, which is a long time on a phone call.
Right.
And he whispered, I can't do that. And I literally said, then you do not have a son. And I hung up the phone.
Wow.
So 10 years go by. I'm 36 years old. And I said to my mom, I don't really want to talk to my dad again, but I do want to know my health history because that's not something we discussed. And he's probably not going to be around for much longer. He was a heavy smoker. And I was like, I need to know kind of what I'm dealing with as I get up into, I'm heading toward 40. So she got a hold of him again, got a hold of his phone number. And I called him. I was in my kitchen in a condo that I owned back then. And he was jovial. Like we'd never had this hard ending to our conversation 10 years earlier. Talked about my family, my health history. He told me everything I wanted to know. And I said, by the way, you mentioned I had a sister 10 years ago when we met. He said, yeah. And I said, I really want to meet her. And he said, well, let me call her and see if she's willing to talk to you. I said, great. So I hang up the phone. About 10 minutes later, he calls me back and she said it was okay for me to give you her phone number. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So I hang up. I immediately call her. She's so excited to hear my voice on the phone. I could tell right away. Her name's Carrie. And I said, I got to be honest, I'm kind of blown away that you're excited to hear from me because, apparently you wanted nothing to do with me for a while. And she said, what are you talking about? And I said, well, Nico, it's our dad's name, wouldn't give me your phone number 10 years ago because he said you wanted nothing to do with me. And she said, he told me that you wanted nothing to do with me.
Brother.
So
Wow.
that came out.
Oh, what tangled webs we
Yeah,
weave.
he's a bit of a narcissistic liar. So then she said, well, the plot thickens. She said, we have another sister from
What?
another woman. Yeah. Yeah. She said, who's even older than me, 2 or 3 years older. Her name's Jane. And she said, I just connected with her recently on Facebook, and she was also abandoned by him. So three kids. He just, zipped up his zipper and walked away. So I contacted her, and within 30 seconds of talking to her, I was in tears because I'd never had siblings before,
Right.
but I could tell immediately that we were blood relatives. And to this day, she is one of the people that I feel the most kindred of spirits with. And I realize what it's like now to have a sibling. Even though we didn't grow up together, we just get each other on every level. We get each other.
Wow.
And it's like, wow, this was meant to be. So I'm actually going to visit her next week in Lansing, Michigan.
So she's in Michigan.
She's in Michigan, and Carrie is in Canada, actually. She lives there with her husband and kids. So yeah, it's been a real amazing blessing to just add 2 sisters to my life who I probably don't talk to as much as I should, as much as I wish I could, but we love each other and we try to get together. We've taken several trips together, and
so you've met both of them in person.
Yeah. We actually flew. My dad's Mexican. He has passed away, but we actually took a trip down to Mexico, the 3 of us, to meet all of his family. And it was fascinating because, there are many of them we resemble. I mean, it was crazy to see these people that we looked like, and they were blown away. I walked in the room and they were like, well, you're obviously Nico's son because you look exactly like him. So
wow.
Yeah, it was really wild. It was really wild. We stayed in touch with them on Facebook. So yeah, we always say we should write a screenplay about this story because there's probably more of us out there. Given he was a traveling performer, I would imagine more than 3 women got pregnant and probably had children. So we probably have more siblings out there that we're not even aware of. But yeah, crazy. Life is crazy. So yeah, crazy.
One of my podcasts, I'll tell you this briefly. So I had the guy's name is Adam. He was 17.
Yeah.
His Jewish mother says to him, Adam, are you gay? Yes, Mom, I'm gay. She goes into absolute hysterics, right? Carries on. Finally, she calms down, and then she says to him what you want your parent to say, which is, you're my son, I will always love you, blah, 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 right? Then she says, well, since we're telling secrets, your father's not your father, and he doesn't know. So leave it to the Jewish mother to upstage your son's coming out, right?
Yeah. Wow.
There's way more to the story. It goes on and on, but somebody can look it up if you want to check it out.
It's funny you say that because I've heard from 2 different people who mothers have confessed to them that their dad is not actually their dad.
Huh.
Yeah. It's like the whole milkman, story. So
right.
Crazy how that works.
Yeah.
Anyway, I told you my whole life story.
That's it?
I mean, gosh, what else do you want to know?
Let's have a little dirt here. Come on. No, I'm just kidding. Well, you're a ton of fun.
Thanks for giving me this opportunity. So this will come out. How long will it take you to put this together?
It'll come out on Sunday.
Oh, wonderful. Okay. You'll shoot me the link?
It'll be on Facebook.
Perfect.
And I'm hoping you will share this with your peeps.
Of course I will. Yes. Cool. Absolutely I will. Yeah.
Well, this has been as great as I thought, but I have one more question.
Okay.
So I usually ask my guests, so what do you live by?
What do I live by?
Yep.
Give me a second to think about that. What do I live by? I mean, I could think of several answers, but I want to give you a good one.
You can do a couple. It's fine.
I think one of the things that I live by these days is that we just truly never, ever know what someone else's story and experience of living has been. And I feel like I'm continually learning this lesson is just to lay my judgments down because I'm quick to judge. And I feel like the universe has been teaching me to let go of that need or penchant because people's stories are so complex and why we behave the way we do is made up of so many different things and triggers and catalysts. And who's to say that if I hadn't had their story, I wouldn't behave exactly the same way? So that's one of the big lessons I'm learning in life and have been learning probably for the past 10 years is just to really give people grace because you just never know what they've been through. That's definitely one of them. Another thing I live by is that there are no, this is going to sound overly woo-woo, but I really believe that there are no neutral thoughts. I believe that we are either thinking thoughts that move us in the direction of the places we want to go in our lives,
right,
or we're moving backwards. They're taking us away from those goals. I don't think we often are just in neutral land. And so I have become very conscious and conscientious of becoming the ruler of my own thoughts in my head, realizing that I get to decide what I spend time thinking about, and I get to decide what thoughts move me closer toward the direction, the true north that I want to be moving toward.
Right.
And if things don't line up with that true north, then I do my best to let them go. And I fail at that every day. I'm not perfect, but I'm in a very different headspace than I used to be. I was a very negative thinker for many, many years. Just was like default for me. And I'm just not that person anymore. And it's taken a lot of work, but it's wonderful to become sort of the master of your own mind in that way and realize that I do get to decide how my day looks. I get to decide how I respond to everything that comes my way.
Right.
I get to set my course every morning and decide where my true north is and line up my compass in the direction that I want to line it up in, and walk according to my own value system, and it doesn't need to be anybody else's value system. At the end of the day, it can be mine, and that's enough. So those are two.
That's great. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me,
Yeah,
Wilkinson.
I really was looking forward to it, and you did not disappoint.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thank
Yeah,
you. That means a
yeah,
lot to me. Well, have yourself a wonderful afternoon, and
I
I
will.
I look forward to seeing this.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So we will be in touch.
Sounds good, my friend. Have a good one.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.